All right, let's go for 200 plus yards. Heck yeah! Welcome back to the channel, Den members. You know, with the success of all of the digital night vision content we have had here on the Phantom Llama's Den, especially most recently the NVG30, we thought it would be beneficial to our viewers if we branched into talking about LAMs, LAMs, laser aiming modules. So with the help of our friends over at Good Nite Gear, we got a hold of a few different devices, and we thought we would start with their MAWL C1 Clone. Now, if this is a device with which you are not familiar, the MAWL stands for Modular Advanced Weapon Laser. The true MAWL is largely considered the greatest weapon-mounted laser illuminator system on the market today. That said, an authentic MAWL will set you back $3,700. Let's be fair. If you've bought NVG30s or other digital night vision, heck, even if you've bought a PVS-14 or binocular setup of PVS-14s, I seriously doubt you are ready to drop another large amount of cash on a $3,700 laser illuminator combo. If you are, more power to you. Now, as we've shown on the channel, it is very possible to use an NVG30 to passively aim down the sights of a firearm. However, a lot of people will still prefer active aiming, and that's where this MAWL clone comes into play. In sharp contrast to the $3,700 price tag, this MAWL clone only costs between $165 and $180, depending on what color laser you get in the device. These clones were originally developed for airsoft and LARPing, and maybe some very small caliber firearms. However, Good Nite Gear and I were very curious to see how this would do on something like an AR-15 platform. More to come on that later in the video. Now, in the interest of being fully transparent, as I said, this MAWL and a couple other devices were provided to me free of cost by Good Nite Gear. And while I am an affiliate of Good Nite Gear, I am not being paid or sponsored to do a video on this product. My views, my findings are my own. You are always going to get an honest, unbiased, objective review of any product that I review on this channel. With that said, if you're interested in purchasing this product when you're finished watching this review, or any of the products that are sold on Good Nite Gear's website, I have a link to Good Nite Gear's shop down in the description and the pinned comment. Use promo code PLD10 at checkout and you will save 10% off your entire order. As always, thank you to Good Nite Gear for being such a friend to the Phantom Llama's Den. Let's get on with this. Now, instead of going through this device and calling out all the similarities and all the differences between the real MAWL and the clone MAWL, I'm just going to call out the features of this clone, as well as some of the parallels between this and the true MAWL. We'll start out with the overall construction and layout of the MAWL clone. Overall, it has the same design, the same form factor as a true MAWL. This model is comprised primarily of aluminum. However, Good Nite Gear does have an all-plastic variant, which runs considerably cheaper. However, this is primarily aluminum with a rubber protective hood around the front of the device. On the front of the device, you have a selector propeller, which allows you to select between off, visible light, and infrared light between the lasers and the illuminators. We'll get into that here in a little bit. You have the zeroing turrets inlaid in the rubber protective hood. They work as most zeroing turrets do. Back from there, you have a 3-position selector switch for the power of the illuminator or lasers. All the way back is setting 1, forward 1 is setting 2, and then to get it into the most powerful, the brightest setting, you depress this little button on top, and then you can move the button all the way forward. Just because I'm on the topic, I have found that I really only use the most powerful setting on the clone. True MAWL units, you'll use the lower settings a little more. However, since this is a clone, since this is a lot lower power than a true MAWL, I have found that the highest setting really is the most beneficial. That, and I have found that the lower settings cause a flicker on digital night vision. So if you get this device, you may just leave it permanently in the most powerful third position. Moving back from there, you have the offset Picatinny rail mount system. And on top of that, you have two integrated push buttons to operate the illuminator and laser functions of the MAWL. If you don't want to use the push buttons on the MAWL itself, there are two plugs that accept pressure pads, which will control the illuminator and lasers as they are built into this MAWL. And I want to point out that if you do decide to go with pressure pads, you will need two pads to connect if you want to use both the laser and the illuminators on this device. And of course, at the back, you have the battery compartment. It's just a screw-in battery cap, which does have a gasket to keep the elements out of the battery compartment. And the device takes C123s or 16 340s. Now, one of the things that makes the real MAWL so special is its modularity. You'll see that I have this set up for a right-handed shooter rifle. However, the MAWL can be flipped around to be left-handed compatible. I'm happy to say that this MAWL clone is also modular. All you do is take the set screw out of the back, and with a little effort, the back of the MAWL will come off, and then you will also be able to take off the middle section. All you would then do is flip the middle section around, and then clip the rear of the device back in place. And as simple as that, you have a fully functioning left-handed MAWL. And that's about it for the layout of this MAWL clone. It's very simple. It is very true to the design of the real MAWL. However, this is where things start to differ quite considerably. Since I already talked about having the power setting at maximum for this device, let's just move into the functionality of the illuminators and the lasers. Let's start out with the visible options on the MAWL clone. First, we'll want to rotate the selector propeller to VIS, visible. You will then see orange or yellow lights come on the back of the MAWL. These lights just mean that it's in a pseudo standby mode. Even if you don't have any of the illumination or lasers turned on, this will drain the battery. So make sure when you're not using the MAWL, you have it either set to turned off or you have the battery removed. When you have an illuminator or laser on, the standby orange or yellow lights turn green. Flipping the selector over to visible, the rear button controls a very visible flashlight. To then turn off the flashlight or any of the other illumination settings, you have to press the button again. If you quickly double press the rear button, you will have a strobe feature. I'm gonna call it out here. The flashlight, while it's not useless, is rather underwhelming for this unit. At best, this light is good for close quarters. This is not something that you're going to be able to light up an outside area very well using. Moving on to the front button, this is the button that controls the laser. This model is a red laser. The other MAWL I have is a green laser. I personally prefer the green laser as it seems to be more powerful, have a greater distance than the red laser. However, the red laser is no slouch by any means. In fact, I was able to use this red laser in broad daylight at the range the first time I took this out to zero test this device. And I was able to just barely make it out on paper at 50 yards using magnification, of course. Lastly, there is a double tap feature for the front button. If you double tap the front button, you turn on the flashlight and the laser. With that covered, let's rotate the selector over to infrared. And just like in visible mode, if you press the rear button once, it turns on a 940 nanometer illuminator. If you double tap it, it turns it into strobe mode. And then the front button activates an infrared laser. And if you double tap the front button, it turns on both the IR laser and the IR illuminator. Now, I know that the functionality there of the illuminator and lasers in the MAWL clone is considerably different from the MAWL or the 2021 revision. However, that's what you get from the MAWL clone. All right, let's talk about zeroing this MAWL clone. Now, you may be wondering, Matt, where's your rifle? Why don't you have this mounted to your gun? Well, we ran into a bit of an issue a while back when I did some firearm and night vision content. We're not gonna get into it other than that YouTube really did not like me doing live fire exercises with my night vision. So we're not gonna do that in this video. Down in the description and in the pinned comment, I have links to some clips over on our little channel, the PLD Clips channel, of us using the MAWL clone in conjunction with a firearm. I'll talk about it here, but to see those clips, you're gonna have to go to that other channel. I would prefer not to have to do it this way, but one of the key differences between the real MAWL and the MAWL clone, when you zero one of the lasers on the real MAWL, you zero both. So if you're zeroing the visible laser, you're also simultaneously zeroing the infrared laser. Not so with this clone. You have to either zero it for the visible laser or for the infrared laser. Naturally, I'm going to be zeroing it for the infrared laser because that is something that I will more than likely use far more than the visible laser. Now, you'll hear people talk about different ways of zeroing a laser on a weapon, especially when it's an offset laser like the MAWL. What a lot of people will be tempted to do right off the bat is zero the laser at a certain distance based off of their optic. That's what's called a converging zero. What most people will recommend doing is setting a parallel zero. That way, no matter what distance you are from a target, all you would have to do is know the slight offset from the target to hit your target. Having talked about zeroing, that's actually a pretty good segue into talking about how this thing performed in the field. Let's talk about the ergonomics and operating this as an attachment on a firearm. Again, if you want to see some actual footage of me manipulating the device on a firearm, go check out the link down in the description and the pinned comment to the PLD Clips file. To put it simply, it is absolutely fantastic. When you have it properly mounted on the top of a rifle, your thumb can easily manipulate the selector propeller to switch it back and forth between off, visible, and infrared. And of course, the buttons are placed just perfectly so you can operate them with your thumb. Now, I know a lot of people do like to use pressure pads with their attachments. You really don't need a pressure pad just because of how the MAWL and the MAWL clone are laid out. I personally do not think you need pressure pads to use this effectively. I was rather impressed. I thought that I was going to have to relegate this to one of my 22 long rifle firearms to maintain a zero for any decent amount of time. I am happy to report that this device, at least a couple devices that were sent by Good Nite Gear, these held relative zero at about 50 yards for honestly a couple hundred rounds. Now, we only shot a magazine or two in the dark with the infrared laser. However, I've used the visible laser at the public range I frequent for a couple hundred rounds, and the laser really hasn't deviated from where I first set it. Now, that's not to say that this is going to hold up for hundreds and hundreds of rounds, but I have been thoroughly impressed with this device, especially given the $180 price point. Do I think it's going to hold up over time like a true MAWL? Absolutely not. But given that it's held zero so far, I think that's a pretty decent bargain for this device. In that vein, I do want to caution anybody that buys this MAWL clone to be very careful when you're adjusting the zeroing turrets. When you start to feel a little more resistance when turning the turrets, stop. If you try to force it, you're going to break it, and it will no longer actually adjust the laser. I already touched on the rather underwhelming flashlight mode on this device, so we won't go into that any further. As I talked about when I did my full review on the NVG30, if you're using this in conjunction with a firearm, you're almost always going to want an external illuminator, such as a weapon-mounted infrared light. It should go without saying, but I'm going to anyway. This infrared light cannot compete with the infrared illuminator that's built into the real MAWL. This light, while it's effective, is nowhere near as penetrating of other light as a real MAWL. There's just no comparison. That said, it is a very good infrared illuminator in very low ambient light situations. Even though it can't cast hundreds of yards in a focus beam or in a floodlight setting, it is still quite an effective infrared lamp for $180. It is more than capable of illuminating out to intermediate distances. The best feature, hands down, is the infrared laser. This thing is incredible. Couple that it can hold zero relatively well with the fact that it can reach out well past 200 yards. This is a very effective tool, even as a clone, even with the lower quality components. The infrared laser in this device makes this an absolute win. There's really nothing more to say. The laser is just fantastic in this device. In all, I believe that this MAWL clone is a perfectly acceptable piece of introductory kit to somebody who has purchased an NVG30 or other digital night vision, or a person that has bought a PVS-14 and wants to get into the infrared illuminator game without spending another couple months of mortgage money. I do truly believe that this is deployable. It's not perfect by any means, but it is definitely a very viable option for an individual's first lamb. So despite its flaws and despite a couple shortcomings I found with this device, I give this my stamp of approval. Definitely go check it out on Good Nite Gear's website. And if you do decide to purchase this or any other item off of Good Nite Gear's shop, remember to use promo code PLD10 when checking out and you'll save 10% over your entire purchase. 10% in this day and age really does go a long way. Thanks, Uncle Joe. All right, before I close out, I just wanted to send out another big thank you. Thank you to everyone that has watched to this point in the video. You are the most dedicated of all of the DEM members. Thank you so much. We have gained several new partnerships with other companies. We are really excited to share that news with you, as well as some really big news with the next big steps for the channel. It's all coming in the weeks, months ahead, and you aren't going to want to miss the content that's coming. On top of all of the content that we have coming, we do have another infrared illuminator and laser coming to the channel. We are very excited to be testing it out, courtesy of Good Nite Gear. As always, Good Nite Gear, thank you for being such a friend to the channel. We truly appreciate you. Stay tuned. That's going to do it for this video, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the Phantom Llama's Den if you haven't already done so. Go check us out on X and Instagram. Go follow us over on Twitch, where we get a little out of hand on the weekends. As always, don't take life too seriously and make it a great day.